We are J&R Food Incorporated, and what we do is we bring down natural food that is without chemicals from the North Country to the inner city, to the Jackie Robinson projects, through Reverend Jackson. Now we are in our infancy. We just got started last year. And in that time that I have been doing this, I have found out that the farmers in upstate New York welcome this. They see that they have very little access to markets. And they say it's a natural fit. You, from the city, coming here and bringing food down. Now, the reason why I'm up there is 27 years ago, I brought property in the North Country. Just as a beautiful place in disappearing Americana. And a year ago, Reverend Jackson called me. He had heard about the property. He heard about what I was doing, and he asked me to get involved in his program. And in that time, I have learned so much about bringing food to the inner city. Now, the first thing I learned was to have natural food for myself. Now, I don't want to offend those who do not eat pork or those who do not eat meat. But when my first experience was a farmer came to me and asked me if I wanted to buy a pig. And I had no use for a pig. And another person said, gee, you would help him out tremendously if you were to buy a pig. And he's selling it at the proper rate, and he fed the animal properly, vegetables, etc. No chemicals, no force feeding. Wasn't modern farming, but it was farming where the pork was done properly. So I bought the pig out of charity. And when we took it to the butcher, and he asked me how I wanted it cut, I gave him, all of the details. And when I put that first pork chop in the pot, my question was, what have I been eating all of these years? It's not the same thing. And then helping the farmers when they needed it. They would call me up, and they knew it was just a vacation place for me, and say, listen, could you give me a day's labor? I began to learn about what was going on. I began to learn the debate about chickens being raised free range without penicillin, about cows being raised without the bovines to get the increase of milk, about crops being planted for the animals without the chemicals in, and about the reality. And one of the saddest things, after getting involved and doing all kinds of labor, I got involved just to sustain myself and pay taxes in hauling animals. And at the end of the auction, when you would haul people's animals to the auction, and if they didn't sell, they would decide they didn't want to take them home. And I bought a calf for as cheap as $5. They just didn't want to be bothered with it. So at the end of the season, I realized that I had a field full of calves, and up there where we get temperatures, last year we got 25 below zero and 32 below zero, and the wind. If you have calves in the open field and you don't have cover for them, you have a problem. So we were just gathering these calves, and the wintertime comes just like a blanket there. And one day we're standing, and one of the Amish came up, gentleman, and says, well, what are you fellas going to do when the weather hits? And I said, I have no idea. And he said to me, well, get your lumber together and tell us when you have your lumber, and we'll come and do a barn raising. Now, the reason for that is I don't know what you would call the young man who works with me and myself. We do the things that the Amish and the Mennonites religion forbid them to do. And certain equipment we use, certain emergencies. I don't know what you would call it, but we cooperate at a fair price. And they repaid without asking. And I went to the local lumber yard and said, listen, I don't have any money, but we need a barn. But I don't know anybody. I've been here for 27 years, and he had a conversation right in front of me with his son, and his son said, well, we're not selling lumber anyway. Why not sit down and make a plan? So he says, how big is this barn you have to have? So we chopped it off 50 by 36 and said fine, and I left. Came to the city. It was a 7-hour drive. Got there, got a phone call, and the young man called me and said, gee, the lumber trucks came today and they put all the lumber down. And halfway through the day, I get another phone call. He says, well, the Amish came over and they saw the lumber and said they'll be here tomorrow morning. So I turned around and drove back up there, and they showed up with about 25, 26 men with a master carpenter pointing where to put all the lumber, with hand saws. They don't use power tools. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we had a barn that was raised. That's, the beginning of the cooperation. So as I learned things, and we had cows there. Now, this is the point I'm making. We had cows. Our cows are covered. They're inside. And a couple of our animals got sick. And so we were standing there one Friday evening, and I forget it, and the Amish gentleman came up with the horse, and he looked, and we were having a discussion. So I says, well, if we call the vets for 2 of these animals, it'll run us about $50. And you would think I had thrown cold water in the Amish gentleman's face. And he says, well, what are you going to do with a vet? And I'm saying, I don't, the vets can give them something to save these animals. And he says, no, we don't do that. And he looked and had magnets, and he was rubbing all over the cow and looking. And he says, we try to do it naturally. We use no chemicals, no antibiotics, and if the animal dies, it's God's will. And I was, my heart was sinking because I was looking at about 500 pounds of meat. And I'm saying, I hope God, decides that these animals live. Well, in the middle of the night, one of the animals died, so we dragged him on back and buried him. This is how strict they are. This is the food that we eat. This is the milk that we drink. These are the eggs that we have for breakfast. And I could tell you story after story about how I learned about proper food and vegetables, all natural. So now I'm involved in raising grain that's proper for the animals, not Purina that has bovines in the food. This is the grains that we raise and we feed our animals so that we don't have to worry about what's in it. We don't have to worry about whether it's natural because, as people know, you're not allowed to advertise no bovines in the milk. State law, federal law. So I know ours is natural. I will tell you, we don't use feed with bovine. We use our own feed, and we have quality food. And now Reverend Jackson has said, bring more to the inner city. And this is what I'm involved in. And so as the word spreads and people hear what I'm doing, people begin to search me out. So this year, we're looking for a banner year of bringing food, buffalo meat. The gentleman who raises buffalo, he has another story about how he got involved with buffalo. And we know the historical situation with buffalo in America, how they were killed so that the Indians would have nothing to eat so that they could starve them. And then the story of fish. A gentleman got involved, enterprising, and the water that we drink, he sells it to bottling companies, built himself a large pond, and grows organic fish with water so clean that he sells it to bottling companies. I intend to bring that to the city so that we can have vegetables, fish, fowl, and meat. Quality stuff for the inner city at the best price that we can possibly give. And as Betty was saying yesterday, we don't even count our labor. We work night and day doing this. It's from the heart to the community. And hopefully we'll get to the point where it will bring us a benefit, where we will be able to pay ourselves a labor and have, what is that, slavery is labor without access to the benefits.